The Manufacturing Edge, where ops leaders break barriers, drive growth, and redefine what's possible. Welcome to part 2 of the 80's called, and they want their management system back. In this episode, Will, Bill, and Paul continue their conversation and explore how combining a proven management system with digital visual management creates a powerful advantage in today's fast-paced manufacturing environment.
Really excited to be back with Bill and Paul in part 2 of our series. Kicking off our discussion with you, Bill, what exactly are the fundamentals or the core principles of the TBM management system?
It really is a systemic approach to end-to-end connectivity within the operations, and it's built on a tiered level system. So you start at the points of impact. What KPIs are the right KPIs to track at those points of impact that align to both your annual operating initiatives and your strategic initiatives, so that you can clearly see that as you roll those KPIs up through the organization, that you are executing to plan or not, and that we build in a strong rigor of problem solving, continuous improvement, because you aren't always going to be on plan. So how do we problem solve with that? If we see problems crop up, we can still be on plan, but we are having ongoing issues, challenges at the points of execution or points of impact. How do we problem solve with those and continue to move forward and perhaps even do better than plan? And then it brings in the leadership focus, because we focus hard on how do leaders engage at all different levels. What is that leader standard work that they need to work against every day, every week, to ensure that not only the system is working properly in terms of how it was set up, but the business is working properly, the problems are being solved, that resources are being allocated, and we're putting the emphasis where it needs to be. And ultimately that leads to a greater sense of accountability and capability building within the business.
And the core operations of a management system in the traditional sense, using paper, whiteboards, Excel spreadsheets, are good in practice, but what are some of those limitations, and why does a truly digitized management system really matter in today's world?
Well, the paper systems are great, are a good place to start, because what you focus on more is the rigor of getting the entire systemic approach working, how leaders are supposed to work, what their leader standard work should be, how do people problem solve, and the actual muscle memory of running the management system. And because paper and whiteboards are simpler, we're less focused on the how do we actually do it? What do I do? It's easier to know check boxes and mark paper and that type of thing than trying to learn both. Oh, I got to learn management system and how to interact with this digital platform. And sometimes that can create an overload in the organization and lead to a less robust implementation at times, or at least the risk of that. Paul, I'm sure you have a perspective on that as well.
Well, yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why IOBA was built in the beginning with a real paper-like experience, right? So this is, we were originally built to replace a paper-based Obea system for what is now Stellantis Auto Group. They needed to digitize their physical Obeas. And we built from the beginning a real paper-like experience so that we kind of minimize that. It doesn't look like a traditional SaaS offering. It doesn't look, dialogue box here, dialogue box there. We use stickies and cards, and it was built for touch from the beginning. And so it minimizes a little bit of that. But the other thing is, when you're talking about whiteboards and paper and Excel, the gap there is that those are all disparate point solutions. I've been a long time, long before I was with IOBEA, said that, an Excel spreadsheet, a whiteboard, a piece of paper is a tool, right? Everything is a tool. And so you try to use the least amount of tooling as possible, because it's all overhead. Now, when you're looking at a large organization that needs to share information easily and quickly across that organization, the move to digital is a natural one. And so it's minimizing that impact. And I think together we try to do that.
In talking about real world examples where this actually comes into play, can both of you touch on where digitization has helped drive faster decision making, maybe better problem solving, or more aligned execution in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So There's a couple of examples that I like to give. And a fast-moving consumer goods company, they're just when you just look at a pretty granular level, their daily ritual around their KPI dashboard went dropped. The amount of time they had to spend on it dropped by 50%. Another global manufacturer in the glass industry, their daily ritual around the KPI dashboard went from 30 minutes to 35 minutes down to 20 minutes. Now that equates to about 2.5 days per person that is in that meeting per year. Like that's not nothing. From Forrester did a report on one of our large customers and the total economic impact. And some of the things that came out of that were, accelerating problem solving and decision making by over 25%. Connecting the leadership and execution by aligning the organization was a huge benefit. And the other thing that is really, I think, a key one, which really helps with the TBM IOBA partnership, is the facilitation of governance and deployment of standards. So when TBM is working with an organization and saying, okay, these are going to be sort of our template rooms and how we're going to do template baseline KPIs. You get this sort of central governance with local flexibility, but you can then move those standards across an organization in a more systemic, easier way, because you can create this kind of a template system that then can go from one production line, then you go to the whole plant, and then you go to the next plant and the next plant, and you can really help drive that across the organization.
I think that's key because as you can get that consistency from one line to the next line and then one plant to the next, is going to let the leadership team at all levels make better decisions because they have visibility. And it's going to help with the speed to execution and problem solving, which is key. One big thing that I think gets missed in paper systems, especially if you have multiple lines in a plant, in a big enough plant, or multiple plants that are making more homogeneous product or similar product, is you can have a problem over here in this plant and they could be dealing with the exact same thing in another plant. And with the paper systems, you may or may not have visibility to that and how someone solves it or approaches it unless you just somehow get the right people involved. And that may not be the easiest thing to do because you may not know who the right people are. But if we can share those things across plants now because of the digital aspect, we don't have to reinvent solutions sometimes. I've said this to several people. Look, sometimes when you run into these problems in places, you go, look, somebody solved this somewhere. This isn't new. We didn't just invent a completely new problem to the world. And so somebody solved something like this somewhere else and probably within our business. We've just got to connect to them. And so with the digital system, you're able to escalate that or ask for help much quicker than if you were at a paper and manual systems. To now it's dependent on it. Well, I just got to go chase this person down.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements there that are really key. One is that if you've got a problem having in another plant, similar problem, and you can know about it. The other thing is if they have taken that and thrown it on an Ishikawa or an A3 and done a bunch of problem solving, all of that stuff isn't sitting on a piece of paper on a desk somewhere, in a floor somewhere, or something that is so easily sent to the other and utilized by the other plant. The other key thing was that we've heard is that it's not, maybe not this plant had this problem and this plant is now having the problem. It's what happens when this type of problem happens over and over again. And when you have a paper-based system, a lot of that kind of, you can't really tell this has happened. This is a systemic problem across multiple plants. You can identify those kinds of things using an electronic system because it's all kept. You're not this kind of discarding the records as you move from month to month or year to year. It's all historically available.
Some of the other things we've seen. So let's take a specific example that we're familiar with in terms of plant A assembles or subassembles product and ships it to plant B to do final assembly and ship to the customer. And plant B is seeing quality problems or something that is problematic with the incoming product from the sister plant, right? And communicating that sometimes through the formal quality systems and informal paperwork and tracking it just gets cumbersome and is not as efficient as whereas if I highlight it as an exception in this digital board and I can create an action and I can now escalate that action and hand it back to the right person at the other plant, and I can even perhaps pinpoint where it's coming from, then we can highlight these things much quicker and get resolution to them. Sometimes those things go on for a long time and you don't even know what's happening, right? Or the connectivity. And so you get a whole pipeline full of product that now potentially has issues with it because of that lead time to close the loop.
Exactly. Right? So again, you're bringing up points where it's so important for that, the on the ground TBM people to be there, because it's the biggest. Using the IOBEA platform is dead easy for the user. The work is in setting up the system properly to support the organization properly. So that is a great example of how escalations work. So shop floor of a auto manufacturer in Michigan, they wouldn't want to send from quality directly up a scale. They want to send the escalation directly to paint. That they want a straight line to paint, because their number one thing that they have to get addressed is with their paint department. And so we were able to actually be able to make sure that direct route was there for them. So that is another really good point, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up.
The other things we've seen in manual systems is we will keep, they'll keep paper at the line and they'll track a week's worth of data on their KPIs. And then you'll see somebody that comes around, picks up the paper, runs in, puts it all in a spreadsheet to do some analysis or generate some graphs or a PowerPoint. And you're like, wow, you talk about non-value additive. We wrote it on the paper, we used it. Now somebody's spending some amount of time to run in and type this in spreadsheets. And whereas in the digital system, we've got the data and we can connect things that are generating the data in some cases directly to IOBEA and the SQDC metrics that we're tracking. And now it can be used for analysis, or you can pull other things when we think about the connectivity of IOBEA, that I can pull other correlated, related data in, and I can put it in a Power BI dashboard and have it present within the room that is complementary to what we're seeing in SQDC management, or helps with problem solving, or just gives more context and robustness to what's going on in that area.
Yeah, there's no inherent flaw, single point of failure there when you've got people running with paper and madly putting it into a spreadsheet to create reports that people are going to make decisions on. Because luckily, nobody ever fat fingers numbers or transcribing data from paper into spreadsheets. I don't know. Does sarcasm work on podcasts? I'm not sure. But anyways, I tried.
I know for a fact I have never mistyped numbers.
No.
Right?
No. I know. I don't know if everybody's perfect like me, but
there is a risk that could happen for sure.
Yeah.
In reality, if I'm typing, it's probably about every third keystroke. But you think about it, the other side of that, though, where pure independent tools, platform, if you will, I think it's a stretch, but a Power BI, which I think is tremendous. I love the capability of Power BI. You can do a lot of analysis. You can present a lot of deep visuals that get you closer to root cause or much more insightful understanding. It's a little more challenging to say, this is my SQDC board. It's even more challenging to create interactivity of people with it for updating countermeasures and those types of things. It's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to create interactive action trackers, escalation capabilities, and those types of things that with an IOBEA are a drag and drop. You just literally take it, pull it, and it's handed off. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, a huge number of our customers are big Power BI users. I mean, that's why we would never say IOBEA is a data analytics tool, because we're not going to out Power BI. I was on a call with a customer that is a huge Power BI user, and their Power BI expert was on with us. What he was saying was that the ability for you to embed Power BI dashboards and reports into boards within IOBEA allows you to put multiple dashboards or reports in one place. instead of having to say I need to go to this report and then this report and alt tab through different things, it's all in one place. You can interact with the dashboard and the reports in iObea. It's pretty amazing. So that's sort of one of the things about iObea. It's like the single place for any given team, whether you're talking about a shop floor production team, an executive team, a cross-functional team. It's the place that they go for all of their work product stuff. So whether that is native to iObea, like KPI dashboards, whether it's Power BI or Tableau dashboard or report, whether it's an embedded spreadsheet or PowerPoint deck, whether it's an A3 Ishikawa that's native to iObea, anything like that, it brings it all together. It could be links out to outside stuff, but it's the one place you go to find your work. I mean, I think there's been 3 analyst reports that show on average it's about 20% of people's time is spent looking for the things that they need to do their job. That's 1 day a week, right? And so you can have this one place where you can go to get all the information. And I think that's why people, the on average, it's about 35% increase in productivity by using iObea.
Yeah, and I mean, I just think that's huge, Paul, the point you make, because I think it is, because it also enables that engagement with teams. So if I'm a supervisor, a frontline supervisor at some point of impact in the shop floor, or even in an engineering group or a quality group, and now I'm looking at my board and I want to say, hey, team, or can a couple of you come over here? Let's have a quick just brainstorming. Let's pull up an Ishikawa diagram. We know we've got this problem, so let's fill out the problem statement and let's just brainstorm real quick, and then we'll come back. We'll go do some work, and then we'll come back and do it again. But it's all right there in one place, and I can see the performance. If I do have something in a spreadsheet or a Power BI that will help me, I can access it, and then I can pull it right into my template and quickly get to some problem solving,
Yeah.
right?
It gets back to that same thing. Right information to the right people at the right time. They can make faster, better decisions.
And it aligns completely with how TBM sees the world, which is faster is always better. Speed to resolution, speed to discovery is crucial. But it does add team engagement. So the other problem with spreadsheets and some of those things, sometimes it's one person sitting in front of a screen
Right.
doing the work. Whereas with this, we can all interact together and do different things in the Obeya room at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting from that Sanofi report. It talked about the fact that it energized and optimized their visual management rituals. Like that was a key learning outcome for them. So that speaks directly to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it seems like every organization, if wanted and if possible, they have this idea of what the management system could be, and how that can affect leadership, teamwork, a number of things like data silos, existing data silos that can be utilized and not modified too much. But Paul, what's the biggest misconception about getting to that final state, about implementing a digital management system and having it run in an optimal way and be effective?
Yeah, I think it depends on who we're talking about, right? So, like I talked a little bit about when the digitization is being driven, where it's being driven from. So, I think like if it's IT, I think the misconception is that all things can be integrated and automated, right? That this is particularly true for the tier board and KPIs. The reality is most KPIs will have a hybrid input mode, some manual, some semi-manual, some fully automated. Um, I was going through with a global pharma company, and they were looking at building out a digitized statement, and they were sort of like a build versus buy scenario. And so, that was being driven out of their IT group because they were actually partway through building something. Um, and so I connected them with one of our other global pharma companies, Sanofi, a customer, and who is very open in talks to other companies. And it was interesting because they were all about it needs to be like fully automated, the input of the KPIs. And what the leaders at Sanofi said was, well, that may be a goal, like whatever, like a big audacious goal. But the reality is that Some information can be automated, some can be semi-automated, where it's like a drag and drop kind of situation, and some just has to be manual. It just is a fact of life. From a more of an OPEX, like operational excellence CI persona perspective, I think it's about the removal of the human element is a big misconception, that it's going to damage the rituals. And depending on how it's digitized, it very well could do that. Like that is a real risk when you're talking about, kind of stitching together a whole bunch of different point solutions. There's that risk, but it doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
Paul, I want to go back to your point around how information gets into IOBEA and how we work with it. The one thing that we all know, IT organizations are typically have far more on their plates than they can manage. It's very common that they're overcapacitated and strained for resources. But as well, when you start trying to create a lot of automated interfaces, the challenge is sometimes to understand the data or the information that is coming from one system and converting it to something the next system can use can be pretty challenging. So let's just, simple case, let's say we want to count cycles on a machine and to know how many things we ran, what our production output was. Oftentimes you can have cases where the machine dry cycles, where it runs, but it didn't actually make a part, or made a part and had a jam. And you won't know all of that necessarily from the machine data in some cases. Some cases you might, but trying to figure that all out, discern all that, to just know, did I make 5 parts this hour or did I make 6 parts this hour? It's not we will say sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You'd be better off for someone to just type in the number 5 or 6 at the end of the hour instead of a lot of effort from some IT team to decipher that input. I'll go way back in my career when I was doing interfaces for equipment in wafer fabs. And there was a fairly well-defined standard for communication within wafer fab equipment. It was called Semiconductor Equipment Communication Spec. And yet you would go around, and I would go around and test these interfaces at the equipment suppliers, and you'd find they all implemented it just a little bit differently, even on similar equipment. So now you're like, okay, what are we getting when when this cycles, and when I make this interrogation, what do I get back? And is it exactly the same? And that could take a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's why we always say that we want the best place we can start is by digitizing an existing data management system, right?
Yeah.
And then failing that, or if there's a new one, it's like a TBM digital management system because we know it. We have TBM people there coaching it. But we also say that we should start with manual entry because it really the act of actually somebody going and inputting that data, preferably on a touch screen, they they get more kind of in touch with why they're doing the things they do, as opposed to magic numbers magically appearing there. And then we move from manual to seeing what we can automate and integrate.
Yeah. I think there's a subtle aspect to what you just said, because if someone just goes straight from, well, I used to count the production and now the number just shows up, in the early days, they're going to spend time going, well, let me go verify that number. I'm not sure if I believe it. Did I really make that number? They're the ones that know it. It's like, yeah, I go type my number in at the end of the shift or at the end of an hour because I know exactly what we did, right? It keeps them more engaged and more in tune with what's happening in the flow of the business, right?
Yeah.
You can sometimes over rely on automated data input and literally take your eye off the ball what's happening hour by hour in your line. Is the risk. It's not guaranteed, but it's a risk.
And Paul, you touched on it, the fact that can be a little more straightforward if there is an existing system in place with laddered processes below. But Bill, is it possible for companies to go digital and digitize their management systems if they don't have an existing system in place?
Sure, you can. You absolutely can. It will take a little more lift or a little more effort to get it done, because if you already had an existing system that was manual or paper or something, right, you would use that as your jumping off point. If you have aspects in some regard or not much at all, then you're really recreating not only the digital aspect, but what is the rigor? What's the methodologies? What are the responsibilities of everyone? that they're supposed to do every hour, every day, and so on, and getting that in place. So you've got a fairly big people change aspect on top of doing the change of going digital, right? So you're kind of hitting people with two big changes. And I think we all know from a change management perspective, that can be challenging, right? And your risk, the degrees of difficulty, if you will, go up, right? And it'll take a lot more lift to get that done.
Yeah, and I think I would say that a huge percentage of, or a large percentage of people that I talk to are at large organizations that say, well, we have this type of thing in place at this facility, we have that type of thing in this facility. There's some commonalities, but what they're really looking to do is to kind of standardize across the both. So they usually will have elements of a digital management system. Maybe one day they had a fully formed digital management system. A lot of them now have like pieces here and there as people come and go, and so that's why, again, coming back to this partnership, I think that's another reason why I think it's really key, because you need to have somebody with that expertise to be able to come and say, okay, we're going to keep this from here, get rid of that, and we're going to put together our system in here and roll it out across the multiple facilities.
If you stick with the core principles that we as TBM in our 30 plus year history have tried to convey to organizations around what are value added activities and what are not value added. And the reason that you started in paper and whiteboards was essentially to make it simple, to not let the way in which you stood up the management system become overly burdensome and require overhead and a lot of other work. It was to get you to understanding the current state of your production hour by hour, and are you hitting your targets? And if you're not, why? So you can problem solve quickly and get them back on track. And to do that in the most expeditious way and most value-added way possible. What I think the capabilities of IOBEA now bring to the table and the maturity of the platform and of the digital world today lets us put it in a digital format and not create any additional non-value added work. We make it simple to get data in. We make it easy to reassign tasks. We can facilitate quick problem solving without that is as easy as pulling out a piece of paper, right? And that's what it needs to be.
And I think that is a really interesting thing there is that I think one other element of why people traditionally start with paper is really easy to crumple up, throw away, and start afresh, right? But in a lot of systems, when you have to go through training and it's sort of like guiding you in the way that is, once it feels like you don't want to break it, you don't want to change it, right? So it's not as malleable as paper is, I think. And we've negated that a little bit, and I think it's a bit better. But I think in that probably lends itself. Would you agree with that, Bill? That the ability to just, it's like, I don't care if I crumple this paper up and throw it away, and I can start a brand new thing, a little bit different, as opposed to I put all this work into trying to form this software package to support this. I don't want to do that again, which is what we have removed from the equation. But.
Yeah, I would agree. I would absolutely agree.
That concludes part 2 of the 80's called, and they want their management system back. Tune in to part 3 as Will, Paul, and Bill explore the best practices and common pitfalls of implementing a digital management system.